Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Groovy. Now we have part 4, which I am so excited for because part 3 opened up so many cans of worms, and that wasn't even really the start of it. It's like a Pandora's box when it comes to actually considering the female psychology, not just the physiology of everything, because when weight loss resistance becomes a thing, as one example, the resistance is mostly psychological. And when body recomposition resistance comes in, where you're trying all the things and then saying calories in, calories out don't work, or it doesn't work this way, there are just so many moving factors. And that's exactly why I have Brandon on here again today to try to nut out these moving factors and explain the value of spending a majority of your year in maintenance, which pretty much is kind of where a lot of the bobbleheads start to find their, their calm homeostasis. Actually, I learned not to say the word homeostasis because it's not really accurate in today's world. It's more allostasis because
So allostasis actually refers to the stress balance, but homeostasis would be a baseline state of being. So you could use them interchangeably. If we're looking at allostasis, we could look at the management of stress vectors within, whether it be your training. Remember, every single thing that we put into our system is a stress. So nutrition is a stress, dieting, a calorie deficit in and of itself is a stress. When we actually refer to homeostasis, if you actually look into physiology, that is a baseline state. So that is the state at which the organism likes to be at. So that could be, we could even look at it from, there's a lot of competing models around body fat regulation. And really the one that I find to be most accurate would be the dual intervention model, which was posited by John Speakman. And that really shows that we have a lower and an upper intervention point. So homeostasis would be between the range. So it's essentially what you could refer to as a body fat settling range. So between those two, your upper intervention point where you start seeing energy expenditure increasing and appetite decreasing to keep you within that, from getting over fat essentially, or between that lower intervention point that would decrease energy expenditure. We would see all the metabolic adaptations that drive you back up to a more comfortable body fat level. You would be in a homeostatic baseline point for your body fat percentage. So either way, we could use both of these concepts, but really getting into like the value. I know that last podcast that we just covered, we were going through some of the effects of chronic dieting, being in low carbohydrate availability, low energy availability, but there's also a caveat to that, and an area that we really should dig into, which is, I know you wanted to speak on, which was the value of learning to live, or essentially of spending more of your time in maintenance, because a lot of people have this unfortunate, habit of going in between extremes. They swing between the pendulums of either extreme deficits and aggressive dieting, and then essentially, just veering off the beaten path and then being in a state of excess. And I really believe,
I just want to quickly interject with that one thing, because the fact that the body is trying to maintain its homeostasis, but there's also the fact we need to consider the external and internal environment, which is what you're getting into today, because the chronic dieting, the environment we put ourselves in are all triggering all these different things where the body is fighting to maintain homeostasis, which is where the allostasis comes in. So the cortisol, the adrenaline, the environment itself, which impacts our hormones in itself, because then there's more stress from the environment, and so on, which is why it's really important to know these factors. So that's what Brandon's talking about now. Now, continue.
Absolutely. So to get onto the topic of maintenance, I really do believe that learning to spend most of the year eating at maintenance is especially beneficial and valuable for those who wish to improve their body composition by building muscle, losing body fat, and maintaining that fat loss. And I believe like even implementing strategic and periodized maintenance phases is essentially essential, because although dieting is a challenging process, what most people really struggle with, if we really get down to the brass tacks, it's, yes, people do struggle during a diet, but what they struggle with even more so is maintaining the fat that they've lost after the diet's done. And we see that statistically around 86% of people will be able to lose a significant amount of body fat over their lifetime. But on average, when we actually look at those people and we follow them over a longer time course, only 5% of those dieters keep that fat off over an extended period of time, which actually just elucidates the fact that most people struggle more with fat loss maintenance than fat loss itself. And this is why I believe taking a phase where we focus on maintenance and really feeding ourselves and fueling ourselves effectively after a fat loss phase has ended is as important or even more important than the fat loss phase itself. Everyone always focuses and fixates on the diet, but they always forget the fact that we need need the diet after the diet, or we need an exit strategy. And really what I've seen is this is something that's extremely helpful to my clients, because I'm not only trying to help them accomplish their goal of improving their body composition by dropping body fat, but I'm also trying to help them get out of that chronic dieting cycle where they constantly feel the need to go on diet after diet after diet, because after every single diet that they've done in the past, they've rapidly regained the fat that they've lost, because there's no attention and no focus and actually no respect paid to the value of maintenance. And nowadays, I work with far more lifestyle clients than those in the general population who aren't interested in getting shredded for stage. So for these individuals, the goal is to lose the excess body fat they've been carrying around for years or for decades, which is negatively impacting their health, their body composition, and their self-confidence. So they not only don't look good, they're not only in a bad state metabolically, but also from a body image perspective, they're suffering internally as well. And unlike like with physique competitors, because my background, I've been coaching 11 years at this point, but the first 5 years was very heavily focused on physique competitors. And with those individuals, we have to separate lifestyle lean from competition lean. And that's something that social media does it enormously bad situation, or does a bad job at doing, because with physique competitors, they get so lean that it'd be harmful to try to maintain that level of body fat past their competition date. But for lifestyle clients, most of them would actually benefit from maintaining a lean, healthy physique year round, especially in comparison to what they've been doing in the past, which is going between cycles of weight loss to weight regain. So these are the clients that honestly I focus the most on maintenance with. And so within these maintenance phases, I really try to focus on helping clients learn what it's like to live at maintenance, which is something many of them have yet to do, or have yet to be able to do in the past, as they're usually bouncing between periods of aggressive dieting and over restricting their calorie intake to overeating and being in an excess of calories. So it's this swinging of this pendulum. However, when I walk these individuals through a strategically executed maintenance phase, it allows them to maintain much of the results they achieve during the fat loss phase. But seeing as I've gotten them out of a deficit and I've increased their energy availability back to maintenance, it improves their biofeedback, their performance in the gym, their ability to drive muscle growth, and their body composition improvement, their ability to adhere and actually stay consistent with their nutrition, rather than what they've done in the past, where it's like they're on track for a few days and then they just break off the beaten path because they just can't sustain the excess restriction that they've put upon themselves. And then also we're improving upon their training, and more so than anything else, we have to realize that coaching is not just about the X's and O's of nutrition in terms of calories and macros, and then training in terms of sets and reps, but also about improving a client's quality of life, because that has downstream impacts on everything else. So getting into a state of maintenance where we're thinking about, really what I try to get through to my clients, and I often say this statement, I'm like, listen, I want to get you outside of a mindset of restriction and into a mindset of abundance and addition. And that's really where increasing calories back up to maintenance and really focusing on fueling their performance and really bettering their overall quality of life is hugely beneficial and often overlooked within our industry.
Before I go into the next section, I want to ask you just a really simple question. Mm-hmm. When people do photo shoots, are they dieting for these photo shoots? Are they getting prepared for these photo shoots?
No, absolutely. So if you ask me, I've done over 100 professional photo shoots. I've been on Men's Fitness, Muscular Development, bodybuilding.com, all these things. Every single one of them was intentional. There have been a few far between. I'll tell you, there's been a couple of shoots that they've given me very little notice, and I've done like a protein sparing modified fast. There has been excess restriction. There has never been a point where I walked around with that physique and didn't suffer the consequences. So I will tell you personally, there was a period of my life where I was landing shoots every couple of weeks, and I was constantly being called by publications, magazines. I was actually, it was a percentage of my income, honestly. So what a lot of people don't realize is there's not only and this is way before social media, so I didn't have this like publicity and stuff like I would have if I was doing it in 2024. But you make money from doing these things, and so they supplement your income, and there's drivers between this. So a lot of the people that you see, they don't look like that. Like even myself, like I stay in very good shape because I have implemented this as a lifestyle. But I've also been training for 18 years. I've built a substantial amount of muscle.
Sacrifices for it.
100%, and I'm more than willing and more than focus on the fact that I am willing to pay the cost to get to the level that I need to be. And so I live a much more structured and regimented life than most would. But when I was in photo shoot shape, I did 15 shows over the years, over 100 professional photo shoots. They were very intentionally done. There was timing. There was, even what a lot of people don't realize is you audition, you go to castings for these photo shoots. It's not like, in today's, generation, there's a lot of, social media stars and influencers that they have a camera crew with them at all times. But when I was getting into modeling, this was 2010, there was none of that. And so I used to go to the city, I would travel, you'd have to take off your shirt, show your physique. And then throughout the course of a casting, say you were 8, 6, 4, 2 weeks out, every 2 weeks, you would send them updated pictures, almost like a check-in, to make sure you were on point. And I remember this one specific time, I had booked one video shoot. So I was supposed to do a essentially a training program with Men's Fitness, both their magazine and then Men's Fitness online. So I was going to go out to the city to shoot with them a full day. And they had 3 other individuals that were before me, 3 other models that were going to do other workouts. And what ended up happening was every 2 weeks, I would send them my updates. And those individuals were sending updates and they weren't on point. So they asked me to be ready early. But because I sacrificed and I literally ate about 1,200 calories as someone that was 200 and something pounds shredded, I ate very little calories, but I got myself in shape in advance 2 weeks early. I ended up getting 4 shoots instead of 1. So imagine like the amount of exposure that I got with that. Obviously there was financial compensation, but I didn't look like that. I looked like that for the day or for a few days. It wasn't like I walked around looking like that. And what many people have to realize is that your best training physique, your best, like even walk around physique is not the one that you see in those photo shoot pictures. There's a lot of down regulations, both from a metabolic perspective, a physiological perspective, and a psychological perspective, where you honestly feel like dog shit when you're a competitor. I always, a lot of times when competitors and we have these conversations, it's like, and I know I've had this with Eric Helms, who is very evidence-based and a great influence in this industry. It's like the worse you feel, often the better you look. And you have to realize that that is not something that everyone should be shooting for or looking to attain. This should be a very short thing. And that's why I really make the juxtaposition where when it comes to a competitor, I want to get them into a slight surplus as quickly as possible. I'm not looking to maintain that leanness with them post-competition. We're looking to do a recovery diet. Whereas if I have someone, and I work with many people in this position, say a male that's from 20 to 25% body fat, I get him down to 15. His metabolic markers look better. His HbA1c has improved. His fasting insulin has improved. His testosterone has actually increased. So we actually have studies there's meta-analysis by Smith and also by Whitaker that look at the effects of calorie restriction on testosterone levels. And actually what they find is when you go from a state of excess adiposity, both in males and females, and you actually get into a healthy range of body fat, say between 12 and 15% per se, that actually testosterone level because you have less fat mass and you also have less aromatization of testosterone into estradiol, which happens in fat cells because aromatase is an enzyme that exists in your fat cells. However, when you get below like 8 to 10% body fat is where you start seeing precipitous declines in your testosterone values and your hormone
You are
levels.
talking about male percentages here because females are obviously
absolutely. So with females, we would add about 8 to 10 more percent from that. So this could be a female that's going from 30% body fat to say 22% body fat. She's most likely going to be much more metabolically healthy at 22% body fat than 32% body fat, just like a male going from 25% body fat to 15%. And that's where we can look to transition those lifestyle clients who have gotten healthier as a result of their fat loss phase into maintenance. But the comparison I was trying to make was it's not about getting you into shredded condition and then trying to go to maintenance and living there. Because if you're shredded, it's not going to be healthy.
Yes, thank you. It's like I wanted to try to make it clear the message you were trying to send because it can really confuse people. And that's one of the biggest things to take away from this, in that a lot of us think and compare ourselves to photo shoot people, not in the way that Brandon was saying, but just random people doing photo shoots online just to put their physiques out there. Random fitness coaches that want to get shredded to put up these amazing photos to get clients in the door or to advertise their business. They're not like that year round, but they're posting those photos continuously because they're the ones that are on there. Very few people post their photos off season unless like very few people in that industry where they're trying to sell big bulky things, and by bulky things I mean products. And there's also the fact that I hate putting percentages to body fat and I hate putting percentages to people because it's like people just want to feel better. They want to look better. They want to look like they're lift and they want to have a badass physique. And too many people are so numbers focused that they don't even know how to feel in their bodies anymore. They don't even know how their bodies feel. They don't know how to read messages from their body for biofeedback, for any of that stuff, because their whole lives they've let a scale dictate it. And then when they try to move away from the scale, they then become obsessed with wanting to find the best body fat reading. It's like none of that, none of it. Just focus on doing the actual action steps to get you to where you want to be. Focus on how you want to feel, because then this is coming about to what I wanted to say with the fact that I was also very focused on stage. That's how I started. I was a comp prep coach. And like, even then, people, once they got really lean, it skewed what healthy lean looks like to them.
Mm-hmm.
I know personally, because once I got really lean, as soon as I wasn't competing on stage anymore and I had to start eating more, I was literally striated to the point where you couldn't pinch me. And I felt like I was fat because I was coming out of that. But that's an extreme to come from. But the thing is, we don't know what lifestyle lean looks like when this is always spat at our face. And then going into the topic of this whole conversation, when you said only 5% of dieters keep fat off, what are the physical and physiological consequences of chronic dieting or only doing mini bulks and not spending the majority of the time away from dieting when all of these bobbleheads actually start to settle?
Absolutely. So if we actually look at
not just physically, but mentally dieting as well. That's important.
No, absolutely. So if we look at chronic dieting cycles, we're going to see down regulations in all components of our total daily energy expenditure. So within that, what's going to end up happening is you're going to notice that not only is your maintenance calorie intake much lower than it was previously because you're in a lighter body, you're a smaller human being, but you're also going to have down regulations in all components that burn energy. So within that total daily energy expenditure, we're going to see down regulations or decreases in your resting metabolic rate. We're going to see decreases in the thermic effect of eating because now you're eating less. We're going to see massive precipitous decreases, especially in your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And you're not going to even realize this because yes, your steps might be going down, but there are so many subconscious movements that we engage in, whether it be blinking, whether it be talking with our hands, that they're going to be downregulated and you're going to be more likely to slouch more, to sit more, to compensate more, even if you're not objectively and actually intentionally aware of these things. And I'll give you an example. I did a nationals prep in 2018. And the week after that prep, I finished the prep and I actually flew out the next day to bodybuilding.com headquarters. And I had a full week of supplement presentations that I needed to perform. And this was, my corporate career at the time. And so I'm doing my first presentation in front of a stacked room. It's 400 people. And I remember they got me on video. They really wanted, this was a new product that I had formulated and that I was presenting information on. So it was an hour-long presentation. And in my mind, to be honest with you, and Ruby, you've interacted with me many times. I'm pretty lively in person. I'm someone, I speak fast. I'm constantly moving around. So that's what I expect when I'm essentially presenting information. I'm pretty engaged with the audience. So I finish the presentation. It gets wrapped up. We go through after I go to the back and my VP of the company is there. And he goes, the first question he asked me is, dude, what happened to you up there? And so in my mind, the first thing I'm thinking of, did I drop the ball in the presentation? He goes, dude, I've never seen you speak so slow and not blink. He was like, dude, I didn't even see your eyes move. And it was because I was still in that downregulated state. I had just gotten off stage a few days prior. I had done the nationals show for Men's Physique. It was on a Saturday. I flew out on Sunday and I did this presentation on Monday. So I'm still downregulated. It was like, I wasn't talking with my hands. He was like, dude, I gave my best effort. I just didn't even realize how downregulated I was. Now, from that end of the spectrum, we also see downregulations in hormones. So we're going to see decreases in testosterone values, estradiol levels, thyroid hormone, not only from a T4 perspective, but also from a T4 to T3 conversion. And that's really where we need to look at the physiological and the psychological benefits of getting out of that deficit and back to maintenance, because all these things can be reversed. These are all what are called transient changes from being in an active state of weight loss and from being in an active energy deficit. So just like the body downregulates when we decrease our calorie intake, we can upregulate a lot of these systems if we go back to maintenance. Now, the issue here is when someone has a history of chronic dieting and they never give themselves the reprieve or the opportunity or they never commit themselves to a time period of eating at maintenance, they will not reverse these adaptations. So really what I think is hugely beneficial is for people to realize, and this is something that isn't sexy. No one talks about these things. They'll talk about metabolic adaptation on the way down, but it's like, do you realize that adaptive thermogenesis, which is the concept of your energy expenditure, adjusting based on your energy intake and your energy output, this is a concept that not only applies to the way down when you're in a deficit, but also on the way up back to maintenance. So really, when we look at one of the most advantageous aspects of going back to maintenance is it's an effective way to reverse the down regulations in our total daily energy expenditure that come from being in a prolonged deficit. So when we go back up to maintenance and we get back to a state of energy balance, it allows us to upregulate all the aspects of our total daily energy expenditure, as eating more helps our bodies burn more calories. So right off the bat, let's think about all these components. If you were in a 500 calorie deficit, Ruby, and I brought you up 500 calories, the first thing that's going to happen right off the bat is your thermic effect of feeding is going to go up from getting out of a deficit and back to maintenance. And so, eating more essentially is going to allow the reason we're burning more is essentially because you're eating more. And with that, there's more calories to burn through the process of digestion, through absorption, and through the assimilation of those nutrients.
Can we
And
just put in the carbs factor here as well? Because it's
yeah,
carbs in themselves are the ones that are mostly linked to upregulating your leptin again. But also, like, so many people fear carbs and they say carbs are the reason why they're fat. But it's like, if, like we mentioned on the last podcast episode, you're not, like, stop just thinking about calories in or carbs in. Carbs are going to make me fat. Think about what these carbs are going to do for your energy. Because this is why when I know you do the same as me, I would expect when you're doing refeeds for your competitors, but let's just talk lifestyle because people listening to this are lifestyle. I don't do competitives. But when you're giving people more calories through carbs, for example, and you're prioritizing the carbs before training, the carbs during the day to feed the activity, that upregulates so much more to the fact that your body is going to want to burn more, to do more. And I know as a fact that I get so much more body heat when I'm eating higher carbs because my body is actually able to say, hey, I can waste calories on heat now. But I just wanted to bring the importance of carbs.
No, you're 100% right. And generally what I will do is it's usually going to be through an increase in carbohydrates. That's going to be the first macronutrient that I increase right off the bat during a bringing someone back to maintenance, because that is going to be the macronutrient that has the most physiological impact on training performance, someone's biofeedback, their sleep quality, their hormone regulation, because we're going to see a better conversion of thyroid in terms of T4 to metabolically active T3 through the role that insulin plays on signaling to the hypothalamus that there is energy available to actually go through these metabolic processes. So we see an upregulation. When we eat more, we're going to upregulate all of these systems. So for instance, the body is hugely adaptive. So just like I was mentioning to you that during this bodybuilding.com presentation, all these subconscious movements decrease because I was in an active deficit. When we get out of that and we go back to maintenance for a period of time, most of us are going to naturally move more because we've increased our calorie intake, which is why I'm a big advocate of this whole eating more and moving more principle of the high energy flux, which I know you want to discuss later. And then from there, we're also, like you mentioned, we're going to increase calories. We're also going to see that our exercise activity thermogenesis, or the amount of calories that we burn through training, also goes up because we went back to maintenance. So by providing our bodies with more calories, we have more fuel in the tank and more energy to put towards more intense and progressive training. And then seeing as, all the components of our energy expenditure will increase when we get out of that deficit and we get back to maintenance, this is going to overall increase the amount of calories you burn per day. So you're going to be able to eat more and stay lean due to taking in more calories, which allows you to expend more calories. Then if we look at it from even more of like a physiological side of things, the other benefits of eating more. So I just talked you through like the total daily energy expenditure benefits. However, we also have to think about what does more food provide us with if we do it strategically. And this is the thing. When I'm talking about getting back to maintenance, it isn't like filling the calorie allotment that you used to have in a deficit and going back to maintenance with junk food. This is about nutrient dense whole food sources for the most part. Yes, you're gonna have some added flexibility, but when we have more food, we also have an opportunity to improve micronutrient intake. So by having a greater amount of calories to play with, I as a coach try to ensure that a client is taking in more nutrient dense food sources and getting a greater intake of micronutrients that can help with their hormone production. Because often when someone comes to me from a history of chronic dieting, they have down regulations in many of their hormonal axes. So we're going to see decreases in testosterone and thyroid and sex hormones. And seeing as many of the women that I work with come to me with these downregulated hormones as a result of chronically underfueling themselves, I often will try to rectify this situation by increasing their calories back to maintenance, but by doing so through mostly nutrient dense whole food sources. So I'm not only getting them out of a state of energy deficiency and low carbohydrate availability, but also out of us being in a state of nutrient deficiency. So I'm looking at increasing sources of zinc. I'm looking at increasing things like magnesium and chromium. And then also from a thyroid perspective, getting them more iodine, zinc, and selenium. Then we also have to think about the fact that when you're eating more, it's going to help with building more muscle. And that's where I'm going to put more calories towards the peri-workout window, which I know you want to talk about in depth more later. So we'll dive into that and I'll hold off on that. But also we have to think about the fact that one of the best benefits that I've seen personally and people that have actually spent a substantial amount of time being at maintenance is it increases the flexibility that they have in terms of the amount of food that they can eat, because it provides them with greater metabolic resilience to higher calorie intakes. So by increasing your calorie intake and building muscle with a client who has been under eating and under fueling themselves, I'm able to get them into a place where their maintenance calories are now higher. So they have a greater ability to handle higher calorie days. And this is especially noticeable. You know, I'll tell you this, I often will have clients that come to me and I'm looking at like a full intake of like their previous dieting history and things of that sort. And one thing they often remark to me, or they're scared of, like when we're working together and they're talking about their previous experiences, is that whenever they've went on a trip and they veered off their diet, they've often gained a ton of weight. Like they always say that like free meals stick to them, or off-plan meals stick to them. And this is something that they've seen in the past where they've been dieting and chronically restricting themselves and underfueling themselves. So anytime they have something off-plan, it kind of just increases their weight. It causes a rapid weight regain. But the best feeling, or the best type of feedback I get, is when I have a client who I've gotten back to maintenance, we focus on fueling themselves, really upregulating their metabolism, their internal systems, on building muscle, fueling training performance. And they go on a vacation, and it's the first time in their lives where they've went on a trip. They haven't tracked every single thing that they've taken in their mouth, but they haven't gained any weight as a result, because they're in a greater state of metabolic resilience. Then from a psychological perspective, I really think that eating more also helps to get clients out of a state of, get them out of the mindset of restriction and into a mindset of abundance and addition. And I find this especially helpful for my female clients who have always been so focused on eating less and doing more. And it's really hard for them to wrap their heads around the benefit of eating more until I walk them through the process and show them the many benefits of doing so. But when they do, and they realize that they can eat more, without falling off the wagon and without doing it in the fashion they had before, because they associate eating more with what they've done in the past, which is over restricting and then falling off the diet and binging on the weekends, which they've always tried to overcompensate for in the past. However, when they realize that by slowly increasing their food intake back to a place where they're able to stay weight and body composition stable, it's something that can give them a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom, and also help them with their mindset in terms of fueling themselves properly and really fueling for the work required and being able to be in a state of abundance rather than this constant state of restriction and subtraction.
This is why I like to use the word fueling more than anything else, because you're not like, performance isn't only performance in the gym, you're performing in life. And like the way that most people approach after diets is that they either eat way too much or they reverse diet, and then because they can't stick to their reverse diet, they end up binging, over restricting, binging again. And it just leads to this catastrophe where, like Brandon said, you're just going to be storing more and more body fat, because that's typically where you end up storing more once you come back from the chronic dieting cycle, because you probably lost muscle mass, you down-regulated everything, and your anabolism, as in your ability to gain more fat, is higher than your ability to gain more muscle if you've lost muscle in the process, if you've down-regulated your metabolism in the process. If I made this connection to intensity, frequency, and volume that we know with periodizing our training, but the same is with your nutrition. You can't have the volume and the intensity and the frequency of your diets always there, because it's going to come to a point where, I love Brandon's term that I'm now stealing from last episode, body decomposition is just going to be the result. And women are just so scared to eat more, I'm already struggling so much as it is to lose this fat. I'm sacrificing this. I'm trying so hard. I'm monitoring my food. I keep binging. There's this mindset where you're always in this struggleville and not seeing the results you want. So it's almost like, I can relate. This is where it's coming from, because this was me. It's like, but eating more carbs, but eating more food, I'm just going to have to do this whole struggle again. I've already struggled so much to get here. But that's the thing, like, you can't base the future on past predicaments if what you did in the past was wrong. If you kept pushing the chronic dieting thing, and this is where the question comes in does, like, a lot of people think that they haven't earned eating more food yet, that they're not lean enough. But this does happen without getting really lean, but just chronically dieting and mentally being so restricted and not in this thriving place, this high flux energy model place, doesn't it? And stubborn body fat doesn't mean you just keep dieting until you lose it, because you can't stay in a chronic deficit for a chronic calorie deficit. The chronic says it itself, can you?
No, so I think really what people, it's a misextrapolation. So often people relate correlation to causation. So what they think is they feel chronically restricted. They're really trying. And I really do. I have these conversations so frequently, especially with the women that I work with, where I'll get on a Zoom consultation with them and I'll walk them through their previous dieting history and I'll ask them very specific questions. So they're sending me over their intake of their food logs and their journals. And most of them are eating 1,200 calories a day. And that just happens to be like this magical number that almost every woman falls upon. And so we're going through it and I see their Monday through Friday. And this is kind of what I alluded to on the last episode we did with that weekday dieter. This is what I refer to them as, because yes, during the week, they're overly restricting themselves. So maybe their maintenance intake used to be 2,000 calories and they decided they wanted to go hard out the gates and they cut about a third of their intake. So they went from 2,000 calories down to 1,200 calories. So they're able to do that Monday through Friday. But then what ends up happening is when I actually have conversations with them, because they don't put this on their written intake, that on the weekends, they fall off the bandwagon. They have a bunch of drinks, they have, appetizers and, burgers and fries and things of that sort, and highly palatable foods like cakes, and they're at Cheesecake Factory, getting the whole rum of tiramisu and cheesecakes. Like when we add that up, and there's many times that I've done the math with these individuals, they're really eating about 2,000 to 2,100 calories per week on a weekly net basis because they've negated their deficit with their restaurant meals and with their habits on the weekend because they've over restricted themselves. So instead of going into a conservative calorie deficit that they could actually sustain Monday through Sunday, they've went on an aggressive calorie deficit Monday through Friday, have downregulated their metabolic systems, downregulated their hormones, suffered all the physiological ramifications of being in a deficit, but gotten none of the body composition benefits. So yes, you cannot chronically diet, especially in that manner, because really what a deficit, and I always try to, get this across to my clients, fat loss is a temporary phase. It is done to get to a goal. But what many people do is they don't do fat loss effectively enough to actually get to their goal. So they're always just spinning their wheels in terms of they're dieting Monday through Friday, they're over consuming Saturday and Sunday. They never get the body composition goals that they want, but every year they're losing muscle, they're downregulating their metabolism, they're actually lowering their maintenance calorie intake. So every time they do overeat on the weekends, they're actually getting into a greater and greater surplus. So then we go to the stubborn body fat area. And these women get into perimenopause where their hormones start shifting. So we go from, being in a normal hormonal pattern due to the menstrual cycle to them having lower estradiol levels. Now, estradiol plays a large role in fat metabolism and then also in storage of fat. So what we see with women who are going through perimenopause, I work with many women in the perimenopausal phase and then into menopause, is we see a shifting of body fat deposition. So actually, if you look into the menopause research, it's not that women gain a precipitous or a significant amount of body fat in the transition to menopause, it's that their hormones change and now their body fat deposition patterns change. So they go from having a gynoid fat pattern where they hold it more in their hips and thighs to actually an android fat pattern, which is what men do, where they hold it more in their stomach and their lower back. So they have the same type of fat patterns as males do, which is actually why we see that once women get into menopause, if they don't go on, menopausal replacement therapy or hormone replacement therapy, they actually have the same cardiovascular risk as men because now they're storing more visceral fat, which is more metabolically unhealthy and more tied to insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and things of that sort. So a lot of times people are they're really, it's because they don't have a physiology background, they don't have a nutrition background. I don't expect them to have that knowledge, but this is where having a nutrition coach or a fitness professional really walk them through the process. Like, listen, I understand that you feel in a state of restriction. Yes, because the majority of your week, you are physically restricted in terms of the choices that you're making food wise. You're also eating low quality food. So you're not highly satiated. You're not making great food choices, but then on the weekends, you're over consuming and you're never getting to the body composition you want. And actually you're going through that process, like I mentioned last podcast, of body decomposition. You're losing muscle mass over time and you're gaining fat mass. So now your body is shifting into actually a more deleterious position, which makes it harder and harder. However, if we were just to reverse that process and really decide to, and this is often what I try to get across to my clients, if what you have been doing for X amount of time, for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, for the last decade, hasn't been working, why are you continuing to do it? Why are you so committed to continue doing the same thing that has yet to work for you? So this is where I try to get them to get some buy-in and also trust in the process. Listen, we're going to try something different, but we need to do something different because what you have been doing has not been working. So if nothing changes unless you change. So let's change your approach. Let's get you sufficiently fueled Monday through Sunday. Instead of having these under consumption days to over consumption days, let's have a moderate intake throughout the course of the week that keeps you in a slight deficit where you can actually lose body fat, or right back at maintenance where you're actually building muscle and you're not depositing more body fat as a result of going and swinging between over restriction and under consumption to an excess of calories and going into a massive surplus. And let's get all your systems back to being upregulated and back to a baseline state where you're in a better position metabolically, physiologically, and psychologically. So not only do you look at food in a better manner where you have a better relationship with food, because it's not all about restricting and binging and going between these cycles, but also let's get your body into a state where it feels comfortable. It doesn't feel like it's in survival mode, where it always has to hoard the fat that you're giving it on a weekly basis, because it knows Monday through Friday, you're going to over restrict yourself and try to starve yourself until you have nothing in the tank. So really, we need to get them back to a place where, that's why I really do, and I often utilize this phrase, and I say, let's fuel for the work required. I often phrase feeding as fueling, because I want people to really, especially the women I work with, I really want them to think about the fact that we are trying to shift them to a mindset of abundance and really realize that we're giving them what they need to be able, and I said this on the last podcast, give your body what it needs so the body does what you want it to do. And that's really what we have to be able to get across to the women that we work with, and really make it clear to them that it's not about earning your carbs. It's not about that you have to earn food. Like, you as a physiological being need energy. All these things that you want. If you want muscle mass, it's an energetically demanding process. So let's fuel for the work required. Let's put in, if you want to treat yourself as a high octane, car, let's put in great fuel for that car, because you wouldn't buy a extravagant sports car and then put in unleaded, like regular gasoline. Like, you would put in like the best octane that you could find. And if you're unwilling to do that with yourself, you're not serious enough about your goals.
Yeah, and this is why it's not just about fueling for the work, but fueling for recovery, fueling for your lifestyle as well. And regardless of where you are starting, getting yourself to a place of abundance and starting to think about where can I improve my metabolism? Where can I fuel my metabolism? Where can I start to get my body into a healthy place so it can be responsive? And this is where the primer phase comes in, where you're building up your nutritional profile, where you're building up your metabolic flux, where you're putting your body into a state where it's more responsive versus always fighting against you, because you need to coerce the body, not coax the body. Like, you want to work with the body, because the body is just going to fight you regardless. It's like a tug of war. The more that you fight it, the more that it's going to come against you. Like, quicksand. In quicksand, the more that you try to fight quicksand, the more that you're going to get into the Netherlands. I don't even know what's at the bottom of quicksand, like a black hole or some shit. Anyway, and then there's the recency bias, which is what you were alluding to with, yeah, okay, so you feel like what you did in the past worked because you just remember the fact that you lost X amount of weight. But the thing is, you don't remember the struggles from that. You don't remember how you felt. So going back into that state is just going to give you more of the same shit. And regardless, instead of trying to fight yourself all the time, wouldn't you want to make this something that's easier, where you can thrive? And this is kind of going into the next topic, which we wanted to talk about, which is the psychological, like, the mind plays such a big role in this, because then this is where people say calories in, calories out don't work. There's hormones, there's this. It's like, yeah, there are hormones, but the hormones are there reflecting your very actions, and not just your actions, but your mental restriction. People undermine how big of a role your psychology plays in your progress, how big of a role your psychology plays in your processing and your approach, and the way that your body is responding, the way that you then respond. And the same goes with, like you said, the perimenopause. It's people are then starting to favor sweets and treats and comfort food, and their behavioral patterns are shifting, which is why they're seeing even more of the fat translocation, because it's not just going to translocate out of nowhere as well at the same time. It's like, because you're feeling like crap, your strength training is probably taking a little toll, and you're not recovering as much because now you need more recovery. It's like, you need to take into consideration all of these different factors, because yes, hormones play a massive role, but they are not separate from calories in, calories out. I had someone say it to me today, and she linked me this article, and she's like, yeah, well, it's not working because I'm doing all the things and I'm just gaining, but she refuses to get any help at the same time. But it's like, yeah, okay, but every single conversation we have, you're doing a new experiment on yourself. You're still trying to lose the weight. Can you really dig deep into the psychological ramifications of this mindset, and then contrast that to living a thriving life where you're optimizing your metabolism, where you're optimizing your body composition, where you have smart nutrition, and where you're spending most of the years at maintenance, building a badass physique and improving your metabolic flux?
Yeah, so I think a big thing that I always try to get across to clients is we cannot divorce or we cannot separate our psychology from our physiology. And a big thing that a lot of people have an issue with is that when they do have a history of chronic dieting, they come from a place in which things have not worked for them in the past. Maybe they've went back to the well many times. So maybe the first diet that they had, and we've seen this with many people, and I've seen this with many clients over the years. The first time, say a young woman in her 20s, she went on a crash diet and she highly restricted herself. She slashed her calories and she got weight loss. So initially, she got a benefit from that. She was young, she was responsive, she had yet to have a long dieting history. So that first fat loss phase worked phenomenally. She was able to get in shape for summer or for an event or for a vacation. And so every year after that, she goes back to the same well. She goes back to the same method where she's over restricting her intake, over exercising in terms of doing HIIT classes or boot camp classes. And every year she expects the same results. But every year her body becomes a little bit more less resilient to that, and it becomes more resistant to that. And that's where we get into the concept where a lot of people are terming diet resistance and metabolic resistance. And I'll tell you honestly, there's nothing in the literature that shows that. Actually, when we look in the literature on diet resistance and metabolic resistance, it actually is in the context of underreporters. It is those who believe that because they're always feeling restricted. So for instance, one of the best studies on diet resistance is by Lichtman et al. It's a 1992 study. And what they showed, or what they found, was it was a group of individuals, both men and women, who reported that they were diet resistant, that they had tried many diets over the years and had yet to be able to lose weight. And within the last 4 weeks, they had been eating approximately 1,200 or less calories on a group average and had yet to be able to lose weight. So what these researchers did was they put them in a metabolic ward where they monitored. They actually had these individuals write down everything they were eating, but they also monitored them. And they also utilized a metabolic chamber to measure their energy expenditure, as well as the doubly labeled water method. And they followed them around for 2 weeks, and they measured their actual energy intake and their energy expenditure through exercise as compared to what they reported. And what they found was a 47% discrepancy on underreporting, meaning that these individuals were actually eating well over 2,000 calories, but were reporting 1,200 or less calories. And then to add on to that, they overestimated their energy expenditure through exercise or physical activity by 51%. So actually, when we look at the actual context of the study, these individuals were claiming to eat less than 1,200 calories per day, when in actuality, they were eating over 2,500 calories per day. And they thought that they had, and these were individuals, if you actually look to the case reports, they reported that they had a metabolic condition, or that they had thyroid disorder, or they were trying to get thyroid medication, and none of them had any clinical markers. They actually did resting metabolic rate testing, because this was another thing these individuals thought. They had a slow metabolic rate. They actually had a higher metabolic rate than the control group. And the reason for that was because they were eating more calories. So they had more intake, and so they had a higher resting metabolism. And so really within that, a lot of people have these self-limiting beliefs. They believe that they have incurred this damage. They've damaged their metabolism, or they have some type of irreparable, condition which is limiting them. Unless you have something that's diagnosed like PCOS, which is known to potentially decrease your resting metabolic rate, or you have hypothyroidism, which can decrease your resting metabolic rate as well. But these are all conditions that can be treated, and you can go to a medical professional to get thyroid replacement or whatever it may be. Then it is not your physiology holding you back. It's oftentimes your psychology. You think you're eating less than you are, or you're in this constant state where you're actually not consistent enough in order to see the results you want, but you also are never getting yourself out of the state of deprivation and restriction to be able to put yourself in a state of abundance where you can build muscle. You can actually build up that metabolic reserve, because muscle is such a metabolically active tissue. It's like it's like gold. It's currency to be able to expend more calories, to be able to actually utilize more of the carbohydrates, because it's a glucose sink. 80%, approximately 80% of the glucose that we store or that we dispose of goes through the muscle. And so there are so many benefits to getting out of this state of restriction and into a state of abundance. But one of the biggest things that people have to overcome, and this is a conversation I quite often have with clients, is you have to get away from these self-limiting beliefs, because a lot of people think there's something wrong with them. Calories in and calories out works for everyone else, but it doesn't work for me. Or I have something wrong with me. And you have to get out of that, because if you continue to have that and really cast that opinion or that belief upon yourself, you're never going to do the things that you need to do to be able to get out of the situation you are in. Because the things that you're doing, the habits and behaviors that you've been engaging in, are what are leading you to think the way that you do. And if you continue to do and execute on the same habits, behaviors, and actions, you're going to stay in the same place that you feel stuck in right now.
Yeah. And I can relate to that, because that's where I was as well. It's like, nah, it doesn't work for me. Like, I knew that the process worked because I saw it working for everyone else, but I thought I was special. I thought that carbs don't work for me because I'm not like those people. Carbs don't work for me because I always store body fat on my belly. Carbs don't work for me because I tried it before and I just gained weight. Like, there are so many stories that we can tell ourselves to keep ourselves stuck, but it's like, do you want a different reality? Because if you want a different reality, you need to start believing different things, doing different things, and being a different person. And that's really difficult to do, because I struggled the most with that because of the attachment I had to my belly fat. But that's exactly why we are doing this podcast today, because the chronic dieting is only going to make that worse because of the hormonal adaptations that you are putting upon yourself. And there was a comment where in one of the groups where someone's like, what's the secret to eating all of this food that people can do and they still stay so lean? How are they able to stay so lean year round? I'm like, most of those people are either on pets. You're not seeing them in their off season. You're seeing them photoshopped or whatever other alterations are out there, or they're just posing in a really nice way. But the fact is, someone who's really overweight could have a higher metabolism than someone who's really underweight because of the fact that there's more of you. You need to eat more to maintain that person. So this myth of slow and fast metabolisms is a myth. That's why it's a myth. But at the same time, the difference between someone who can eat more and someone who can't is that metabolic flux. They have more muscle, they move around more in the day, and they've spent more time learning this craft. Like, my maintenance was literally 1300 when I started. I was also really active. It was 1300 because I was also boom, 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 18 kilos lighter back then. And that's the thing, like, building more muscle mass, being more active, creating this lifestyle over time. Let's cue here time, which is why we're bringing this in. You need to spend most of your time building the body that you want, not breaking it down, not sabotaging it with all of the things you throw at it, because the only thing that's marketed out there these days is fat loss. But because you mentioned muscle as so important, what are the importance of prioritizing the maximum amount of nutrition in your day with your micronutrients, processed food versus non-processed food, maintenance, I should say, because there's a difference between the thermic effect there as well as the nutrient benefits, because it's not just about the calories, it's what are these nutrients doing for you? That in itself enhances your metabolism, enhances your body composition. Eating mostly at home versus restaurant meals, but most of all, this muscle factor coming into this, and the training quality, the training effort, training in itself, because those things that I just mentioned also impact your energy and your training and your recovery. So one thing doesn't happen in isolation. Looking at all these different things, but realizing you don't have to put yourself into the deep end of the swimming pool. You have all the time in the world to build up your toolbox and capacity to do this. But knowing the importance of it is going to give you a big buy-in. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about now.
All right. So you threw a lot at me there, Ruby. So I'm going to take it one by one. We're going to start with I'll start with the importance of food quality, because I think that is a fundamental rock that many overlook, honestly, especially in our industry today, especially in the direction in which content creation has went, where it's all calories and macros, and that's all people see, and that's all they want to know. And it's if it fits your macros or die. And I come from a nutritionist background. That is, I have an education in this, and I came from a time where no one was counting their macros, to be honest with you. So I think that my opinion on this is a little bit different, and I've seen both ends of the spectrum. But when it comes to manipulating our nutrition to improve our body composition, we know that energy balance is the key underlying principle that governs our ability to lose body fat and maintain a lean physique. But I find that this often can be taken too far, especially by those in the if it fits your macros crowd, where many only focus on the quantity aspect of their diet in terms of the total amount of calories they're taking in on a daily basis. But then they often disregard the importance of food quality and the food choices they make on a daily basis. And what's really interesting to me is we have a lot of people in this industry that are in the quote unquote nutrition industry, but they don't talk anything about nutrition. They don't talk about food choice. They don't talk about micronutrients. They don't talk about the downstream cascades and effects of actually your food composition, your food selection. It's all about the macros. It's all about numbers. And it's almost like, are we mathematicians or are we nutritionists? Because you guys have kind of taken nutrition out of the field of nutrition. You've taken instead of going from a food first approach, you've done a food by numbers approach, which I often find very interesting. And I do think that macro counting is an immensely beneficial accounting tool, but I think that really we have to look at this a little bit more granular and go into the nuance. And this is where kind of like my content and the things that I've really went through over the years has been really beneficial for those that have listened. So although our total calorie intake should be the foundation to our diet, we cannot overlook the quality of the foods that make up our diet and expect to be able to succeed in a fat loss phase, and also to be able to succeed long-term in terms of not only losing that body fat, but also maintaining it past the diet itself. So when I design a diet for a client, especially when their goal is to maximize fat loss and maintain muscle to recomp their body composition, some of the main focuses that I have within their nutritional construct or the diet setup that I'm making for them is food quality and food selection, as our food choices and the quality of those choices heavily influence how well we can manage our hunger and consistently stick to our calorie and macro targets. And the quality of our foods also impacts both sides of the energy balance equation in terms of how many calories we burn per day and also how many calories we eat due to how different foods impact our metabolism, the thermic effect of feeding, and our satiety levels, as well as our drive to eat. So I know you had mentioned that you wanted to cover how food quality influences metabolism and energy expenditure, specifically when it comes to whole food versus like processed food sources. And what's really interesting is that it is true. And we hear this like, there's always these trite sayings in nutrition or within fitness in general. And it's like all calories are created equal. Yes. From an energetic perspective, yes. Calories are created equal from a unit of energy perspective. However, not all sources of calories are created equally. So from a thermic effect of feeding and energy expenditure perspective, we see vastly different effects when we compare single ingredient whole foods versus processed refined foods. And what research finds is the more processed a food item is, the less of a thermic effect it has in compared to an unprocessed whole food source. So when you eat whole foods in their unprocessed state, they have a higher thermic effect of feeding. So you net out less calories from them as compared to their processed counterparts, which affects both the calories in and the calories out sides of the energy balance equation. So for example, there's I believe it's a 2010 study. And what they did was they compared the differences in post-meal energy expenditure, which essentially means how many calories people burned after eating two different meals. And they specifically compared a meal made up of whole foods and a meal made up of processed foods, with both meals being equated in terms of the calories and macros they contained. So for the if it fits your macros guys out there, it'd be like, oh, it's the same meal. However, let's get into more nuances behind this. So in the whole food condition, they had healthy participants eat a multi-grain bread and cheddar cheese sandwich, whereas in the processed food condition, they had the same subjects on a different occasion eat a white bread sandwich with a processed cheese product. So this was like American Kraft Singles or like Velveeta cheese or one of those, those fake cheeses that you see at the supermarket. And when they measured the post-meal calorie burn from both meals, they found that the whole food meal increased energy expenditure by approximately double as much as compared to the processed foods meal. So the whole foods meal had a thermic effect of feeding of around 20%, I believe, whereas the processed food meal had a thermic effect of feeding of a little over 10%. So this shows how the quality of our food sources impact our energy expenditure, but also how our food quality impacts and influences our energy intake. So when we go on the other side of the equation, so we just spoke about how food quality impacts energy expenditure, but let's look at it from the opposite side of the equation. So, a great study that elucidates this is one by Kevin Hull in 2019, where he conducted a tightly controlled metabolic ward study comparing an unprocessed diet made up of whole foods versus a processed diet to see the impact that it would have on calorie intake and body fat levels. So in order to test this, they took weight stable men and women and had them live in a metabolic ward. So this is essentially a lab setting where they were able to monitor everything. And they did this for 4 weeks, where all their meals that were provided to them were tracked. They had every calorie they ate was monitored and tracked by the research team. And then what they did was they split them into 2 groups, where one group consumed a processed food diet, and then the other group consumed an unprocessed foods diet for a period of 2 weeks. And then what they did was they had a washout period and then switched them over. So they all did the same conditions. So the group that had been on the unprocessed food diet went to the processed food diet, and the one that had been on the processed food diet went to the whole foods diet for 2 weeks. During each 2-week trial, these individuals were told to eat each meal to fullness to truly see the impact that different levels of food quality would have on their ad libitum intake and their satiety levels. And now what's great about this study is that both the unprocessed and processed diets were matched in terms of their calories, their protein, their fat, their carbs, their fiber. I mean, I think even sugar and sodium was equated. So the only difference was one was whole foods and one was processed. So it really was the level of processing and the quality of the foods that were making up these meals that these subjects were being provided with. And they found that when participants were on the processed diet condition for those 2 weeks, they ate an average of 500 plus calories more per day as compared to when they were in the whole foods condition. And as a result of this increase in calorie consumption, their body fat and body weight significantly increased. Where on the processed diet, they gained more than 2 pounds in that 2-week period. So they were gaining at a pound per week. Whereas when we look at what they did or their body composition outcomes in the unprocessed whole food diet, they actually lost 2 pounds. So they inadvertently went into a deficit because they were more highly satiated. So overall, when we compare whole foods versus processed foods, it's important to realize that the quality of your food choices will impact both your energy expenditure, so the amount of calories you burn per day, and your energy intake, because it's going to influence your satiety levels, your hunger levels, and also your likelihood to passively overconsume calories if you're making up most of your diet from processed foods, which are far less satiating than whole foods. And then all those decisions and all those impacts on the energy balance equation are going to have downstream effects on your body composition and your ability to make progress with your physique. So this is why I'm a huge advocate of eating a diet mostly composed of whole foods, due to the fact that if we look at if we compare and contrast whole foods versus processed foods, we see that generally whole foods are going to have a higher protein content and a higher fiber content, which both increase satiety and help us to manage our hunger. They're going to have a higher thermic effect of feeding, and they're more nutrient dense, so that you get more bang for your buck, both in terms of satiety per calorie and nutrient per calorie. Whereas when we look at processed foods, they're more calorie dense, so more calories per gram. They have less food weight and less food volume, so they're less satiating. They have an overall less effect on satiety and leave us feeling less full, which often leads us to what's called passive overconsumption, where we actually overconsume calories to get to the same level of satiety that we would with whole foods, and they're nutrient devoid or sparse, so they leave us more likely to suffer from micronutrient deficiencies, which is why I'm often, advocating that we not only want to, if you're in a calorie deficit, you not only want to, you want to be in a calorie deficit, but you don't want to be in a nutrient deficit. But the same thing, there are many people that are overfed from a caloric standpoint, but undernourished from a nutrient standpoint, and that's because most of their foods are junk foods and processed foods. So really, we have to realize that there is a heavy influence, or there is a large aspect of importance that needs to be placed on your food choices, in addition to how much food you eat. Now, when it comes to like eating at home versus restaurant meals, this is another area that I think a lot of people often overlook. And I think, honestly, and this is from working with clients, and also I've dug into literature on this, like it's pretty crazy what you see when you actually look into like the literature on restaurant meals. I did an entire podcast on this on the Chasing Clarity podcast, but it's pretty wild. So one of the things I think is most beneficial for someone who has the goal of improving their body composition, whether that be to lose body fat or to build muscle, is to learn to cook and to eat more of their meals at home. As I often find that many who struggle with attaining and maintaining a physique they're happy with, and that allows them to feel good and function well, is they go out to eat very frequently. And another aspect of this is they're unaware of how much that could be hindering their ability to make progress or maintain the progress that they've made so far. So this could be the individual that diets, and gets to the place that they want to be. And then it's almost like all bets are off. They have no exit strategy, and they just decide that they're going to celebrate. And by all means, there's a time and place to celebrate things, but it shouldn't be like you go from this place where you just attain your goal and then you overfeed yourself to the point that you regain everything that you just lost and more. And so the drawback to eating out at restaurants very frequently is that the meals are often far more calorie dense than any of us would assume or even imagine. The meals are generally composed of lower quality food sources, because if you really think about it, and I really want to get this across to people, because I didn't realize this until I actually worked with a chef, and I actually worked with him as a client, and I spoke to him in depth on Zoom and on calls about what they put in their foods. And I was honestly taken aback, because I am from a nutrition background, on what they put in these foods. And it's like, their goal isn't to serve you the healthiest, highest quality food, but rather to make a profit and to make things taste so good and palatable that it keeps you coming back for more. So it's more of about an enjoyability perspective, not a feeling perspective. And also with restaurant meals, we see that they're low in protein and high in refined fats and starches. Another issue is that even for those who try to stick to their plans and track at restaurants, it's almost impossible to do so, and to do this accurately, even if you look at the nutrition facts that are provided on restaurant menus, as these are highly inaccurate. So for instance, there's research that has been done, which has looked at the accuracy of labeled calorie content of menu, like labeled items, compared to what these actual food items contain calorie-wise when they were tested in the lab. And this research has actually found that some individual restaurant items contained up to 200% of their stated calorie counts, meaning they had double the amount of calories. And when they included the free side dishes, so like the fries or the mashed potatoes or whatever it may be, like those side dishes that come in addition to the entree, that discrepancy increased to an average of 245% over the numbers that were listed on the menu. So just for an example for you guys, if a meal setting contained 1,000 calories, this means it would actually contain well over 2,000 calories. And if you actually added the side dishes, that means it would contain 2,450 calories. So that's generally more than most people even eat at maintenance. So think about if you add that, you eat three or four meals per day, you have your normal 3 meals, and you eat your fourth meal as a restaurant menu, that could easily put you into a surplus. In general, even if you're eating at maintenance or if you're in a diet, it could easily erase the vast majority of your deficit for the week because you're unaware of how many calories are truly in restaurant meals.
All of this is just, it all factors into each other, into helping you live and thrive at maintenance. It's not just about just getting by and struggling through it. The more that you are aware of this stuff, the easier it is for you to maintain a leaner physique. And that's why I'm like, this podcast is called Optimizing Your Body Composition and Boosting Your Metabolism with Smart Nutrition, because these factors, nourishing your body with the right foods, being able to eat more food versus just smaller meals for a lot of calories, aka restaurant meals, processed meals, that all impacts your sleep, your recovery, your mood, your anxiety, your training quality, the ability to build muscle and burn fat. And this is exactly what smart nutrition is, as well as spending most of your time away from dieting, building muscle, because building muscle is like, it's the metabolic gold, like I've always said, and then you just said it too. I'm like, that's what I say. But it is your metabolic gold. Without that, you're gonna have crappy energy. You're gonna feel sluggish. You're not gonna have the same insulin sensitivity to be able to use the carbs, to be able to use the nutrients. Like, there is so much that having more muscle brings you, and living an active life fueled with the right foods can bring you to live the life that you want to live. The life that you want to live, because living that life that you want to live allows you more easily to maintain the body composition that you want to live in. Because most of us don't want to feel sick, lethargic, bogged down with crappy digestion, with brain fog, not being able to concentrate. We don't want to feel that way. So why do we keep doing the very same things that leave us stuck in a cycle, feeling like we're the victim to metabolic damage, victim to carbs make you fat, victim to all these different things, when you can use these tools to help you live the life that you so much say you want to live? Like, why else do you make the New Year's resolutions as well, which you would hear on the podcast right before this one, how to make proper ones. But putting all of these tools together, you literally have what you need, minus the accountability, minus the coach that will calibrate as you evolve through the process. Like I always say, which is what I want to end the podcast with and let you tie it up in the same knot, because I know you believe the same thing. The transformation in itself is not in the diet. It's not in the food that you eat. It's not in the training. It's in the actual coaching, because there are many diet plans out there. There's so much free information out there, but there are still people falling into the same diet traps, falling for the same bullshit that's online, not getting to where they want to be. And that's why I say the transformation is in that coaching aspect, in applying it to you and in helping you troubleshoot your already busy life, in taking that burden off you so that you can focus on the things that you do best. I'll let you tie it up.
Absolutely. I think it's essentially, it's incredibly important to have someone in your corner, whether that be a fitness professional, a nutritionist, a coach. I will say that even coaches need coaches. And at this point, about 40% of my roster are other coaches. So it is even nutrition professionals. I have dietitians. I have people with PhDs in nutrition that I coach personally, because it isn't about a lack of knowledge. It isn't about a lack of information being out there. There is so much readily available information. When I was first coming up in this, we didn't have that. I was going on boards and mentioning Alan Aragon in 2006, you know what I mean? And now he's a friend of mine. But it's like, we didn't have this readily accessible information. I will say, with the information age, social media, you have to be very cautious of who you get information from, and you really have to look for reliable resources, because there's a lot of people that are just peddling misinformation and disinformation. But really, it isn't about the information. A lot of people know what to do. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to. I always say that my goal as a coach and as someone within this, a nutrition professional within this industry, is to bridge the gap between research and information and practical application. I never forget that last part, because I am not a content creator. I am not an educator. educator. My first and foremost thing is I am a coach. I'm in the trenches with people. I've coached over 1,000 people. And that's what really lights me up. I love putting out informational content, especially in long form, because this is exactly like I'm able to have these conversations with you, Ruby, because I do this all day. Like before I got on this call with you, I had done another podcast, but I was on client calls all day. So I work through these problems. And really what I try to do is find the bottlenecks within a client's lifestyle and the anchors. These are the things that are holding them back. And often is, how do we implement this into their lifestyle? I always say that optimization is not about what looks best on paper. It isn't what you see on some reel on Instagram that this is the optimal movement because of this biomechanical leverage and this, that, and the other. It isn't about the optimal macronutrient split based on Octavia or whatever it may be. It is optimal is what it is for you. Optimal is within the constraints of your lifestyle. So when I think about designing a plan for a client, I'm looking at what's optimal for their goals and then also what's practical for their lifestyle, their constraints, their responsibilities, their preferences. And then I'm meeting in the middle because that's what true optimality is. Optimality is what can you do and execute on a daily basis. And that's really where coaching comes into play. Coaching is not, we have to differentiate between coachers and programmers. There's a lot of people that you can get a program on the internet from. They can build you out some cookie cutter thing with a spreadsheet or a template, and they send it on their way and they never check back in on you. Coaching is about being a guide. It's about being a mentor. It's about being an objective person in your corner to give you feedback that you would not be able to do. And one of the biggest things that I do from a coaching perspective is I help people get out of their own way. I help them work around the self-limiting beliefs they have about themselves, or the metabolic damage they think they've incurred, or all of these different things, these obstacles that they have, and even just these stresses of life. I work with so many fitness professionals because they're so tired of programming for themselves that they're unable to prioritize themselves. They're so busy paying attention to their clients and to really, digging into their business that they find it hard to be able to really take care of themselves. So that's where I'm in their corner to help guide them through the process. And I also mentor a lot of other coaches. But even for my lifestyle clients, I work with, very high achievers, essentially. So these are people that own businesses. These are people that are competitors, that are lifestyle clients. I work with everyone from all different spectrums and backgrounds. They all have their own limitations, their own constraints, their own obstacles that we have to overcome. But coaching really comes through the process because we teach you how to implement this into your lifestyle. We make this customized for you and really show you the path and help you walk through the process. And you always have someone to get accountability from, but also to provide feedback to you. What can we do better? And also, it's not only about what you can do better. Often there's times to push a client and then a time to pull them back. And a big thing is also acknowledging clients' wins, because a lot of us, especially those that are type A and goal oriented, they're their biggest critiques. So they are the most critical of themselves. And oftentimes I have to take a client and pull things back and say, listen, I love your vivacious attitude. Like you want to just continually get better, but let's pause for this moment. I put up a post, actually it's from a client from Australia. I put up a post yesterday and that was 11024. So, people can go back to my Instagram page when this podcast gets released, but it is of a transformation of about 2 years where we did a building phase. He gained 44 pounds in the process. And he messages me after and he says, we just entered a fat loss phase after a very long extended building phase. And he said, dude, I didn't realize how much progress I had made because every day I look at myself in the mirror, but it took my wife reaching out to me and saying, you got to go to Brandon's page and look at that transformation he just posted of you. And he said, dude, I have gained so much physically, mentally. I've become a better coach because of you. I've become a better individual, a better businessman, but also I didn't realize how much progress I'd made because every week I'm just looking to get more. And thank you for acknowledging the fact that I've gotten so far in this process. He's gained 44 pounds of tissue in 2 years. That's astronomical. And it's, it's someone that, he didn't realize his own progress despite being a very high achiever. He owns multiple businesses. He actually has a coaching business on the side. This is a very accomplished individual. So coaching is not only about helping you get over some of the obstacles that you have and also acknowledging maybe some of the deficits within your lifestyle. Like, maybe you're not good at tracking or there's some programming aspects from your training or your nutrition that you really need to dial in, but it's also acknowledging your wins and helping you celebrate those so that you realize that this is a part of a process. We're making this a lifestyle for you. And it's not just about the X's and O's of calories and macros and spreadsheets. And I always say, if a coach, all they give you is 3 numbers and send you on your way, you don't have a coach, you got a programmer. So look for someone that's going to get in the trenches with you, that's going to relate to you, that's going to have empathy and compassion and really care and be interested in you. That's what coaching is about. Like I always say that coaching is a partnership. It's a team. Like we're a team. Like this is a collaborative effort between me and my clients. Yes, I do the programming and stuff, but I want their feedback. I want to get their subjective and objective feedback. I want to see their metrics in terms of actual subjective metrics, as well as objective metrics. So I'm looking at numbers in the gym, but I'm also looking at like, how do you feel? How soreness ratings, disruption ratings, like all these different things and parameters of their life. I want to hear about their stresses, but also the good things going on in their lives. So really when it comes down to, you guys are hugely capable of making change, but nothing will change unless you change. And often what ends up needing to happen is you need someone else to come and help you make those changes, because often we get in our own way and we're unwilling to make them for ourselves because we're scared. But if someone can tell you, listen, I've been in your position, you know, a coach can tell you, I've been in your position, I understand what you're going through. And I also have a couple hundred other individuals that I've worked with. Like, for instance, with me, I end up attracting a lot of chronic dieters because I've worked with so many in the past. So it's like, I have a lot of women that come to me that have lost their cycle, that have lived a downregulated life, who have spent, you know, decades, you know, under fueling themselves. And they come to me and they're like, I'm really scared to eat more. And it's like, listen, I understand, because I've been there myself, having been a former competitor, but also I've worked with a couple hundred women that I've helped restore their menstrual cycle, help them look better, function better, feel better. And now they're in a state of abundance rather than a state of restriction. So if you're willing to buy into the process and give me 12 weeks at the minimum, we will get to that place and we will be a team and we will work towards the land of prosperity, essentially, both in terms of progress, but also like, it's not just about physique progress. It's also about improving the rest of your life.
Yeah, I always say that as well. 12 weeks only just getting started. And in that 12 weeks, you are setting yourself up for the rest of the journey for success. 12 weeks isn't going to get you your dream body. 12 weeks is literally you getting started into the into the right trajectory for the rest of your life. And that's probably why I keep attracting chronic dieters as well, because it's my history. But everything in this podcast, I highly recommend you listen to this one twice and go back and listen to the last one we did as well, because you can really be your own best version of yourself if you trust yourself enough to invest in yourself, because there are so many other disturbances that you can put your focus and energy to instead of worrying about all these nuances that someone else can do for you. And if you can't afford that, then just make sure that the people you are following are the right ones. And if you're listening to this podcast, I would bet my money on the fact that you do listen to the right people. It's just not implementing so many different things at once, which is why I did the last podcast. But thank you again for coming on. I know you need a jet. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. Brandon won't be on again until probably this time next year. And we will see you next year, perhaps together, but you'll hear me again next week. And Brandon will have all his stuff down below as well. Brandon DeCruz _ the Chasing Clarity podcast. And is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, the only thing, when is this releasing? Ruby,
This will be releasing the 3rd week of February.
All right, never mind. I have a seminar coming up, but we will miss it. So no worries. As always, Ruby, thank you so much for having me on. Audience, I hope you guys loved part 4. If you guys have yet to listen to part 3, 2 and 1, go back a little bit in the feed. Part 3 will be released probably right prior to this one, but 2 and 1 were actually released in 2021, I believe. We recorded this about 2 years ago, or 2022. We re-released it, and that has been a series that went over the primer phase as well as the body fat overshooting effect, and also how to go through a post-diet phase. And so we've covered kind of all ends of the spectrum at this phase, at this point in our podcasting journey together. So I look forward to the next one and hopefully going into another topic and diving deep.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Thank you guys for listening. And if you like this, don't forget to give it a 5-star rating. You'll find some killer other episodes around carbs, including ones from Gab Fundero and Alan Aragon, which are bang on trying to gain more knowledge in this aspect of things. But other than that, I hope you have a glorious start to the year. Don't put so much pressure on what happened in January. You can have a fresh start, and hopefully this information can help you in your next steps forward.